Derek's voice drifted from the kitchen while I arranged chrysanthemums in the dining room vase, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Oh, by the way, I invited Natalie to join us for dinner this year. She's going through a tough time with the divorce, and I thought it would be nice. You can be mature about this, right? I set down the vase carefully, my hands steadier than they should have been. My ex-girlfriend from 8 years ago, the woman who'd left me devastated and questioning everything about myself, was being invited into my home for the most intimate family holiday of the year. Derek stood in the doorway of our Laurelhurst Victorian, coffee mug in hand, watching me with that expression I'd come to recognize over the past 4 months. The one that dared me to object, that anticipated my resistance so he could call me dramatic or insecure. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What he didn't know was that the phone in my pocket was already recording. What he didn't know was that Carla, my best friend and tech consultant, had installed monitoring software on our home network 2 months ago. What he didn't know was that I'd been documenting everything since July, and this moment, this perfectly calculated cruelty disguised as compassion, was exactly the kind of evidence Benjamin Walsh had told me to capture. I smiled at Derek, the same warm smile I'd given him on our wedding day 6 years ago. That sounds lovely. I'm sure Natalie would appreciate the support during a difficult transition. His eyebrows lifted slightly. He'd expected a fight. Really? You're okay with it? Of course. We're all adults here. Besides, it's been 8 years. Water under the bridge. Derek's satisfied smirk told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about kindness to Natalie. This was a test, a power play, another chess move in a game I'd only recently realized we were playing. He turned back to the kitchen, already texting someone, probably Natalie herself, letting her know his wife had agreed without protest. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording, then immediately forwarded it to the encrypted cloud storage Carla had set up. File number 43 in a collection that was about to dismantle my husband's carefully constructed world. But Derek had no idea that his thoughtful gesture was actually the final piece of evidence I needed. The conversation had started innocently enough 3 months ago. Derek had mentioned running into Natalie at a commercial real estate conference in Seattle. She looks great, he'd said over dinner at Lucia's Italian bistro. We talked about the old days, about how different things are now. She asked about you, actually. Wanted to know if you were happy. At the time, I'd felt a small twist of something in my chest. Natalie Bradford had been my first serious relationship, 4 years of my life from age 22 to 26. We'd talked about marriage, about opening a design firm together, about adopting children someday. Then one Tuesday morning, she'd told me she wasn't sure she was gay after all, that she needed to explore her feelings for men, that she hoped we could stay friends. 6 weeks later, she was engaged to Keith Morrison, a portfolio manager she'd met at a networking event. The breakup had shattered something fundamental in me. I'd spent 2 years in therapy with Dr. Linda Garrison, rebuilding my sense of self, learning to trust again. Derek had seemed like a gift when I met him at a gallery opening 4 years after Natalie left. He was confident where I was hesitant, decisive where I was uncertain. He took charge of restaurant reservations, vacation planning, even the renovation of the house we bought together. At first, it felt like security. By our 4th anniversary, it felt like suffocation. But that dinner at Lucia's, when Derek first mentioned reconnecting with Natalie, I'd pushed down my discomfort. You're being ridiculous, I'd told myself. It was a chance encounter at a professional conference. Normal, adult, meaningless. Then Derek mentioned her again a week later. Natalie texted me some contacts for that Beaverton project I'm working on. She knows everyone in commercial development out there. And again 2 weeks after that. Ran into Natalie at the Pearl District networking mixer. She says hello. By the 4th mention, I'd started paying attention. Not out of jealousy, at least not the kind Derek would have expected, but out of a growing awareness that something was systematically wrong in my marriage. It wasn't about Natalie specifically. It was about the pattern I was finally seeing clearly after 6 years of missing it. The controlling restaurant choices that somehow always aligned with Derek's preferences. The vacation destinations that appeared collaborative until I realized every suggestion I'd made had been subtly redirected. The joint bank account I had access to but somehow never felt comfortable using without asking first. The friends who'd gradually stopped calling because Derek always seemed annoyed when I made plans without him. Most significantly, there was the money. $85,000 had moved out of our joint savings account over the past 14 months. When I'd asked Derek about it in August, he'd sighed with exaggerated patience. Investment opportunities, Tori. Real estate doesn't wait for committee meetings. I thought you trusted me to manage our finances. I do trust you. I just want to understand where our money is going. Our money. He'd laughed, not unkindly, but with that edge of condescension I'd learned to recognize. I earned it, I invested it, and I'll explain it when there's something to explain. Unless you'd rather take over the portfolio management? Do you even know what a commercial bridge loan is? I had an MBA from University of Oregon and had been managing project budgets for my interior design firm for 8 years, but Derek had a gift for making me doubt my own competence. In that moment, standing in our kitchen with him looking at me like I was a child asking where babies came from, I'd almost apologized. Instead, I'd called Carla. Carla Jensen had been my best friend since college, and unlike many of my friendships that had faded under Derek's subtle disapproval, Carla was too stubborn to be pushed away. She ran a cybersecurity consulting firm and had been saying for 2 years that something about Derek felt off. When I finally told her about the missing money and the defensive reaction, she'd gone quiet for a long moment. Tori, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Don't confront him again. Don't ask more questions. Just document everything. I'm going to connect you with someone. That someone was Benjamin Walsh, an attorney who specialized in complex divorce cases involving financial misconduct. Benjamin had listened to my story during a consultation at his downtown office, taking notes in a leather journal that looked expensive and permanent. Then he'd asked a question that changed everything. Does your husband know you have access to the home computer network? Yes, we share everything. It's all on the same Apple ID. Benjamin had exchanged a look with Carla. We need to set you up with separate, secure access. Carla, can you handle the technical side? What followed was 2 months of careful, invisible investigation. Carla installed monitoring software that Derek would never detect, software that captured every website he visited, every document he accessed, every email he sent from our home network. Benjamin connected me with Raymond Brooks, a private investigator whose specialty was financial fraud in domestic cases. What they found made the $85,000 look like pocket change. Derek had been systematically moving money out of our joint accounts and into investment properties held under a shell company I knew nothing about. 4 rental properties in Beaverton, 2 commercial spaces in downtown Portland, and a vacation property in Cannon Beach. All purchased using money from our joint savings, our investment accounts, even the inheritance my father had left me when he died 3 years ago. Total value, approximately $1.3 million. All titled solely in Derek's name through entities I'd never heard of. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the prenuptial agreement I'd never signed. Benjamin had found it buried in Derek's email archives, a document backdated to before our wedding, with my signature forged on every page. The prenup stated that in the event of divorce, I would receive nothing from the marital assets Derek had brought into the marriage, and anything acquired during the marriage would be split according to who earned it. Since Derek's real estate income dwarfed my design firm earnings, the prenup was designed to leave me with virtually nothing. He's been planning this for years, Benjamin had said during our last meeting. The properties, the shell companies, the forged prenup. Your husband has been preparing to divorce you while ensuring you walk away with as little as possible. Then why hasn't he filed? I'd asked. Benjamin's answer had chilled me. Because he's still moving assets. Once everything is properly hidden and documented under his sole ownership, he'll file. My guess is he's waiting for one more big score. Maybe your design firm? Do you have significant business assets? I'd thought about the contracts I'd recently signed, the major commercial project in the Pearl District that would bring in $400,000 over the next year, the largest contract my firm had ever landed. I'd mentioned it to Derek last month, excited to share the success. He asked detailed questions about the payment schedule, Benjamin had noted. When you'd receive the deposits, how the money would be structured. That's your answer. He's waiting for that income to hit your account so he can claim it as marital property before he files. The pieces had fallen into place with sickening clarity. Derek wasn't just stealing from me. He was choreographing a long-term financial extraction that would leave me broke and tangled in legal battles I couldn't afford to fight. The control, the condescension, the subtle isolation from friends and family, it had all been preparation for this moment. And then, 3 weeks ago, he'd invited Natalie to Thanksgiving dinner. At first, I hadn't understood the connection. Raymond Brooks had explained it during our emergency meeting the day after Derek's invitation. I'd been following the financial trail, and Natalie's name shows up. She's listed as a consultant on 2 of Derek's shell companies. She's been signing documents, approving transfers, even co-signing on one of the Beaverton properties. Natalie is involved in stealing from me? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Raymond had pulled up bank records on his laptop. More than that. Natalie's been having an affair with your husband for at least 5 months. I have photographs, credit card receipts from hotels, text messages recovered from Derek's backup cloud account. They've been calling it a business partnership, but the messages make it clear this is personal. The betrayal had multiple layers, each one more devastating than the last. My ex-girlfriend, the woman who'd broken my heart 8 years ago, was now sleeping with my husband and helping him steal everything I owned. The Thanksgiving invitation wasn't generosity. It was a victory lap. Derek wanted to sit at a table with both of us, watching me serve dinner to the woman who was about to help destroy my life, knowing I had no idea what was coming. Except I did know. And I'd been preparing my own surprise. Carla had helped me set up what she called a digital fortress. Every device I owned was now encrypted and separated from Derek's access. My business accounts had been quietly moved to a new bank with enhanced security. The documentation of Derek's theft and the forged prenup had been compiled into a file that Benjamin described as legally devastating. Raymond had photographs, financial records, and even video footage from Derek's properties showing him and Natalie together. Most importantly, we discovered something Derek didn't know we knew. The commercial property in downtown Portland he'd purchased last month using $70,000 from our savings. It was in violation of city zoning laws. Derek had bypassed proper permits, bribed an inspector, and falsified environmental reports to rush the purchase before property values increased. Raymond had evidence of all of it, including recorded phone calls where Derek explicitly discussed the illegal aspects with Greg Paulson, his business partner. This wasn't just marital fraud anymore. This was criminal activity that could result in actual jail time. Benjamin's strategy was elegant in its simplicity. We would let Derek proceed with his Thanksgiving plan. We would let him believe I was oblivious, compliant, mature about my ex-girlfriend joining our family holiday. We would document every moment, gather every piece of evidence, and then, 3 days after Thanksgiving, we would strike. Benjamin would file for divorce with an emergency motion to freeze all assets. Raymond would present his evidence to the district attorney's office. And I would hold a press conference, because Derek's commercial real estate reputation in Portland depended on his image as an honest, successful developer. The plan required me to play a role I was growing exhausted of playing, the understanding wife, the woman who didn't ask too many questions, who accepted her husband's decisions with grace and trust. But every time I felt my resolve weakening, I thought about that forged signature on the prenup. I thought about Natalie's text messages to Derek, the ones Raymond had recovered, where she'd written things like, "Can't wait until this is over and we can finally be together," and "Tori has no idea how good we are at this." They thought they were so clever. They thought I was so blind. The morning after Derek's Thanksgiving invitation, I met with Dr. Linda Garrison, my therapist. I'd been seeing her weekly since discovering Derek's betrayal, and she'd been instrumental in keeping me grounded through the investigation. Linda's office was in a quiet building near Pioneer Courthouse Square, all soft lighting and comfortable chairs designed to make difficult conversations easier. "How are you feeling about the Natalie situation?" Linda asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "Like I'm watching a movie where I already know the ending." I paused, trying to articulate the strange sensation of living a double life. Derek thinks he's orchestrating this humiliation, this test of how much I'll tolerate. He has no idea I'm 3 steps ahead. That must feel very isolating. Playing a role in your own marriage. I thought about that word. Isolating. Yes, but also clarifying. For years, I've questioned myself. Wondered if I was being too sensitive, too demanding, too suspicious. Now I know I wasn't crazy. I was being systematically manipulated. Linda nodded, making a note. "The gaslighting you've experienced is significant, Victoria. Derek has spent years making you doubt your own perceptions. That kind of psychological abuse takes time to heal from." I'm angry. Not just at Derek, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. The signs were there. You saw them when you were ready to see them. That's not a failure. That's survival. I left Linda's office feeling steadier, more certain of the path ahead. Carla was waiting for me at a coffee shop 2 blocks away, her laptop already open. She'd been tracking Derek's digital activity around the clock, watching for any sign that he suspected our investigation. "He's getting sloppy," Carla said, turning the screen so I could see. "Look at this email he sent to Natalie this morning." The email was short but damning. "Tori agreed to Thanksgiving without a fight. This is going to be easier than I thought. Start preparing the final paperwork for January filing. Once her Pearl District payment comes through in December, we move." January. He was planning to file for divorce in January, right after my biggest business contract deposited its first payment. The timeline confirmed everything Benjamin had predicted. "There's more," Carla said, pulling up another screen. "I found communication between Derek and a lawyer named Mitchell Cross. Cross specializes in contentious divorces where one party wants to leave the other with nothing. They've been strategizing for 8 months. 8 months. I thought back to February, trying to remember what had changed then. That was when Derek had started suggesting I expand my business, take on bigger contracts, build up my company. I'd thought he was being supportive. He'd been fattening the accounts he planned to claim. What kind of person does this? I asked Carla, though I knew she didn't have an answer. What kind of person spends years systematically destroying someone they claim to love? Someone who never loved you, Carla said quietly. Someone who saw an opportunity and took it. Derek's type doesn't feel remorse. They feel entitled. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren, my younger sister. "Heard Derek invited your ex to Thanksgiving. Please tell me you're not actually doing this." Lauren lived in Lake Oswego with her husband and 2 kids. She'd never particularly liked Derek, though she'd been polite about it for my sake. When I'd finally told her about the investigation 2 weeks ago, she'd cried angry tears and offered to let me stay with her family anytime I needed. I texted back. "It's part of the plan. Trust me." Her response was immediate. "I trust you." I've never trusted him. That night, Derek came home from work in an exceptionally good mood. He'd brought flowers, expensive ones from the boutique shop on Belmont Street. "For you," he said, kissing my cheek. "I know this Thanksgiving situation might be awkward, and I appreciate you being so understanding about it." I arranged the flowers in a vase, their beauty feeling like a calculated gesture. "It means a lot that you're supporting Natalie through her divorce. She must be going through a hard time." "She is. Keith really did a number on her, cleaned out their joint accounts before he filed. Can you imagine doing that to someone?" The irony was so profound I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "No, I can't imagine." Derek settled onto the couch with his laptop, probably reviewing the properties he'd bought with my money. I went upstairs to my office, the one room in the house he rarely entered because it was filled with fabric samples and paint swatches he found boring. I pulled out my own laptop, the secure one Carla had set up, and reviewed the latest evidence Raymond had gathered. There were photos from last Tuesday. Derek and Natalie having lunch at a restaurant in Beaverton, sitting close, holding hands across the table. More photos from Thursday evening, the two of them entering a hotel in southeast Portland, not emerging for 3 hours. Bank records showing Derek had paid for Natalie's divorce attorney, a detail that made the timeline even clearer. He'd encouraged her divorce so they could be together once he'd successfully extracted everything from me. Benjamin had scheduled our final strategy meeting for Monday, 1 week before Thanksgiving. The plan was set, but he wanted to review every detail, ensure we hadn't missed anything that could compromise the case. Raymond would present everything he'd gathered. Carla would explain the digital evidence. And I would have to make a final decision about whether to go through with the public exposure Benjamin was recommending. Your husband's reputation in Portland commercial real estate is his greatest asset, Benjamin had explained. Once he's exposed as a fraud and a thief, his business collapses. That's leverage. That's how we ensure you get everything you deserve and he faces real consequences. The next 3 weeks would be the longest of my life. 3 weeks of pretending everything was fine while Derek and Natalie finalized their plans. 3 weeks of setting the table for a Thanksgiving dinner that would become the centerpiece of the evidence against them. 3 weeks of being underestimated one last time before I showed them exactly who they'd been messing with. Derek called up from downstairs. Tori, I'm ordering from Lucia's for dinner. You want your usual? I smiled at my reflection in the darkened window of my office. That would be perfect. My usual. As if he really knew me. As if 6 years of marriage had been anything other than an elaborate con. The man downstairs ordering pasta had no idea that the woman he'd been systematically betraying had already won. He just didn't know it yet. And in exactly 3 weeks, sitting at a table with both of us, Natalie would learn that karma sometimes takes 8 years, but it never forgets an address. The Monday morning meeting at Benjamin Walsh's office felt like preparing for war. The conference room table was covered with file folders, each one labeled with a different aspect of Derek's deception. Raymond Brooks arrived first, carrying 2 additional boxes of documentation that he set down with a heavy thump. Carla came in behind him, laptop bag over her shoulder and a thumb drive containing every digital footprint Derek had left over the past 4 months. Benjamin sat at the head of the table, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed the timeline we'd constructed. Victoria, before we finalize the strategy, I need you to understand the scope of what we're dealing with. This isn't just a case of marital infidelity or hidden assets. Your husband has committed multiple felonies. Raymond opened the first box and began laying out photographs in chronological order. These are from the past 5 months. Derek and Natalie meeting at various locations throughout Portland and Beaverton. Restaurants, hotels, the properties he purchased with your money. But it goes back further than their romantic involvement. He pulled out a document that looked like a contract. This is from 2 years ago. Natalie was hired as a consultant for Derek's real estate company. Legitimate on paper, but look at the payments. $15,000 a month for services that have no documentation, no deliverables, no actual work product. She's been on his payroll for 2 years? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That was before they supposedly reconnected at the Seattle conference. The Seattle conference was a fabrication, Raymond confirmed. Derek never attended any conference in Seattle. He and Natalie spent that weekend at the Heathman Hotel here in Portland. I have the hotel records, the credit card statements, even footage from the hotel security cameras showing them checking in together. Carla pulled up a spreadsheet on her laptop. The payments to Natalie total $360,000 over 24 months. That money came from the company Derek set up using your joint savings as seed capital. Essentially, he used your money to pay your ex-girlfriend to help him steal more of your money. Benjamin made a note on his legal pad. The question is why Natalie would agree to this. What's her motivation beyond the obvious financial benefit? Raymond pulled out another folder, this one thicker than the others. Natalie Bradford has her own financial problems. She filed for bankruptcy 4 years ago after a failed business venture. Her credit score is destroyed, she has outstanding debts with 3 collection agencies, and her divorce from Keith Morrison left her with virtually nothing because she'd hidden assets poorly and got caught. So Derek offered her a way out, I said slowly. Money, a relationship, and revenge against me for some perceived wrong from 8 years ago. There's more to it than that, Raymond said. I interviewed some of Natalie's former colleagues and friends. After you two broke up, she had significant regrets. Multiple people told me she tried to reconnect with you several times, but you'd blocked her on everything and moved on. She apparently told friends that you were the one that got away, that leaving you was the biggest mistake of her life. I remembered those first few months after the breakup, the desperate emails I'd deleted without reading, the calls I'd sent straight to voicemail. Dr. Garrison had encouraged me to maintain boundaries, to protect myself while I healed. I'd never known Natalie had continued trying to reach out. So this is what, exactly? Some twisted way of getting back into my life? Benjamin interjected. I think it's simpler than that. Derek saw an opportunity. Your ex-girlfriend with financial problems, unresolved feelings, and intimate knowledge of your vulnerabilities. He cultivated a business relationship, then a personal one, and leveraged her emotional investment to make her complicit in his fraud. Natalie probably believes they're going to end up together once the divorce is finalized. Are they? I asked. Raymond's expression was grim. I found evidence of a third woman. Someone named Melissa Chen, lives in Seattle. Derek's been seeing her for at least 8 months. Hotel records, flights, expensive gifts. He's running the same playbook with her that he ran with Natalie. The room fell silent. Derek wasn't just stealing from me and manipulating my ex-girlfriend. He was conducting multiple relationships simultaneously, each woman unaware of the others, each one serving a specific purpose in his larger scheme. Melissa Chen is a commercial loan officer at Pacific Northwest Bank, Carla added, pulling up a photo on her laptop. The same bank that approved Derek's most recent property purchase, the one in downtown Portland with the zoning violations. I'm guessing she helped push that loan through despite the property's obvious problems. So Natalie helps him steal and provides cover, Melissa helps him secure fraudulent financing, and I'm the one left holding the empty accounts and forged prenup, I summarized. How many other people is he using? That's what concerns me, Benjamin said. We've identified 3 women he's manipulating, but there could be more. His business partner, Greg Paulson, has been notably absent from the company's day-to-day operations for the past 6 months. I want to know why. Raymond nodded. I've been trying to get an interview with Paulson, but he's avoiding me. However, I did speak with his wife, Patricia. She confirmed they're separated and that Greg has been acting erratically, making poor business decisions and hiding financial information from her. Derek pushed him out, I realized. Whatever Greg knew or discovered, Derek found a way to neutralize him. Carla pulled up another document. I found emails between Derek and a corporate attorney discussing the buyout of Greg's partnership stake. The price offered was significantly below market value, and the timeline suggests Derek pressured him to accept quickly. Greg signed the papers 3 months ago. Did Greg know about the fraud? I asked. Based on the email patterns, I'd say he suspected something but couldn't prove it, Raymond answered. There's a series of messages where Greg questioned some property transactions and Derek responded with what looks like threats. References to damaging personal information, hints about exposing something from Greg's past. Classic intimidation tactics. Benjamin leaned back in his chair. This means Greg Paulson could be a potential witness. If Derek threatened him, Greg might be willing to testify about the company's practices and what he observed. I thought about Greg, a quiet man I'd met at company events, always slightly uncomfortable at the social gatherings Derek organized. Patricia Paulson had been kind to me at those same events, and now I understood why. She'd been living through her own version of my nightmare. We need to approach Greg carefully, Benjamin continued. If he feels attacked or exposed, he might become defensive. But if we offer him protection and explain that his testimony could help build a criminal case against Derek, he might cooperate. The next folder Raymond opened contained financial documents that made my head spin. Bank statements, wire transfers, property deeds, corporate filings. The paper trail of Derek's systematic theft spread across the table like evidence of a long con. "Let me walk you through the structure," Raymond said. Derek established 4 shell companies over the past 3 years. Each one has a slightly different name but the same registered agent, a service that specializes in anonymous business formation. The companies are Cascade Holdings LLC, Pacific Property Ventures LLC, Northwest Investment Group LLC, and Summit Real Estate Partners LLC. He pointed to a chart showing the flow of money between accounts. Money from your joint savings and investment accounts was transferred to these entities in amounts small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts. 10,000 here, 15,000 there, never more than 20,000 at a time. Over 3 years, it totaled $1.3 million. "My inheritance from my father was in those accounts," I said quietly. "The money he left me specifically to ensure I'd always have security." Carla touched my hand briefly. "We're going to get it back," Raymond continued. Each shell company purchased properties. The 4 rental properties in Beaverton are generating approximately $8,000 a month in rental income. The 2 commercial spaces in downtown Portland bring in another $15,000 monthly. The Cannon Beach vacation property is listed on rental platforms during peak season for $3,000 a week. Derek has created a substantial passive income stream using your money, and none of it is in your name. "What about taxes?" I asked. "He has to report this income somewhere." "That's where it gets interesting," Carla said. "Derek's been filing taxes for these companies, but he's significantly underreporting the rental income. I found 2 sets of books. One for the tax returns showing minimal profit, and another showing the actual revenue. That's tax fraud on top of everything else." Benjamin made another note. "Federal tax evasion charges carry serious prison time. The IRS doesn't take kindly to people who maintain dual accounting systems." "There's something else," Raymond said, pulling out a final document. "This is a life insurance policy Derek took out on you 18 months ago. $2 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. You never signed the application, which means he forged your signature on this too." The room temperature seemed to drop. A life insurance policy I'd never known about, with a payout that would solve all of Derek's financial problems. I thought about the sleeping pills he'd started suggesting 6 months ago, the way he'd encouraged me to drive more, to take on projects that required me to work late in empty buildings. "I'm not saying Derek was planning to harm you," Benjamin said carefully, "but this policy creates a financial incentive that's deeply troubling. Combined with everything else, it suggests a level of premeditation and calculation that goes beyond simple theft." "I need air," I said, standing up abruptly. The walls of the conference room felt too close, the evidence too overwhelming. Carla followed me out into the hallway where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Portland. The city spread out below us, normal people living normal lives, unaware that some of them were probably being conned just like I was. "This is bigger than I thought," I told Carla. "I knew Derek was stealing and cheating, but this is a criminal enterprise. He's been planning this for years, manipulating multiple people, creating elaborate financial structures to hide what he's doing. Which is why we're going to bury him," Carla said firmly. "You're not alone in this, Tori. You have a team of people who are making sure Derek faces consequences for everything he's done." We returned to the conference room where Benjamin was organizing the documents into categories. Criminal charges, civil claims, divorce proceedings, each aspect of the case requiring its own strategy. "Let's talk about the Thanksgiving dinner," Benjamin said. "Derek's invitation to Natalie is a gift in terms of evidence, but it's also emotionally cruel. Are you prepared to sit through that meal knowing everything you know?" I've been preparing for it since the moment he extended the invitation. I want them both there. I want to watch them think they're winning while I document every moment. Raymond pulled out a small device that looked like a pen. "This is a recording device. Voice activated, 8-hour battery life, stores data locally. Keep it in your pocket during dinner. We'll capture every conversation." Carla added, "I'm also going to set up cameras in your house. Derek thinks he's in control, but we'll have video evidence of how he and Natalie interact, whether they slip up and reveal their relationship, any incriminating statements they make. What about after Thanksgiving? I asked Benjamin. What's the timeline for filing? We file the Friday after Thanksgiving. The court will be closed for the holiday, which means Derek won't be able to respond immediately. By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll have already presented our evidence to the district attorney's office and secured emergency asset freezes. Raymond added, I'll also be contacting Melissa Chen that same day to inform her that Derek is married, that she's involved with a man under investigation for fraud, and that her cooperation could help her avoid charges related to the fraudulent loan she approved. My guess is she'll turn on him immediately once she realizes she's been used. And Natalie? I asked. Benjamin's smile was cold. Natalie is complicit in multiple felonies. Wire fraud, conspiracy to commit theft, falsifying business documents. She'll have a choice between cooperating with prosecutors or facing charges herself. Either way, her role in this scheme becomes public record. The meeting continued for another 2 hours as we reviewed every detail of the plan. Contingencies if Derek became suspicious, backup documentation if anything was challenged in court, strategies for dealing with his inevitable attempts to manipulate the narrative. By the time we finished, my head was pounding but my resolve was absolute. That evening, I came home to find Derek in the kitchen cooking dinner, something he rarely did. He'd made salmon with roasted vegetables, opened a bottle of expensive wine, and set the table with our good dishes. I thought we could have a nice evening, he said, pulling out my chair. Just the two of us before the holiday chaos starts. This is lovely, I said, sitting down and accepting the glass of wine he poured. What's the occasion? No occasion. I just realized I've been distracted with work lately. Haven't been as present as I should be. You deserve better than that. I watched him across the table, this man I'd shared a life with for 6 years, and wondered if there had ever been a genuine moment between us. Had he ever actually loved me, or had I been a mark from the very beginning? The salmon was perfectly cooked, the wine was excellent, and the whole scene felt like a performance. How's the Pearl District project coming? Derek asked casually. You mentioned the first payment was due in December. There it was. The real reason for the romantic dinner. He wanted to confirm the timeline for my biggest contract so he could plan his own financial extraction accordingly. It's going well. The client approved the final designs, so the first installment should hit the account around December 15th. That's fantastic, Tori. You've worked so hard on this. We should celebrate when the payment comes through. We should, I agreed, taking a sip of wine. Maybe a weekend trip somewhere? I was thinking bigger than that. Maybe it's time to expand your firm, hire some additional designers, take on even larger projects. You have so much potential. He was already calculating how to claim the incoming money as marital property, how to inflate the value of my business so he could demand a larger share in the divorce. Every word of encouragement was actually about his own benefit. That's something to think about, I said noncommittally. After dinner, Derek suggested we watch a movie, something we hadn't done together in months. We settled on the couch and he put his arm around me, the gesture feeling as hollow as everything else. Halfway through the film, his phone buzzed repeatedly. He tried to ignore it, but finally excused himself to take a call in his office. I waited until I heard his office door close, then quietly moved to the hallway where I could hear his voice through the door. I told you not to call during the evening, he was saying, frustration evident in his tone. Yes, everything is on schedule. The payment comes through mid-December, I file in early January. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Tonight proves it. She actually suggested a weekend trip to celebrate. There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Natalie, calm down. You're going to get everything I promised. The Cannon Beach property is already in our names. Once the divorce is final and the dust settles, we'll be free to do whatever we want. Just stick to the plan. Another pause. The Thanksgiving dinner is important. It shows I'm being generous, that I'm trying to maintain a civil relationship with her past. It makes me look good when this goes to court. Plus, watching her play hostess to you will be the perfect test of how compliant she's become. If she can handle that without complaint, she'll accept whatever terms I give her in the divorce. I moved silently back to the couch, my heart pounding but my hands steady. The recording device in my pocket had captured everything. Derek returned a few minutes later, smiling apologetically. Sorry about that. Work crisis. Where were we? We finished the movie in silence, Derek believing he'd successfully maintained his cover, unaware that every word he'd just spoken would be played in a courtroom. When we went to bed that night, he kissed me goodnight like nothing was wrong, like he wasn't actively plotting my destruction. I lay awake in the darkness, listening to him breathe beside me, and thought about all the nights I'd slept next to this man, trusting him, believing in our future together. How many of those nights had he been awake planning his escape, calculating his profits, congratulating himself on his successful deception? My phone buzzed quietly with a text from Carla. She'd been monitoring our home network and had seen Derek's phone call. Got the recording from your device. Benjamin says this is gold. Derek just confessed to premeditated fraud on tape. Another text came through, this one from Raymond. Confirmed meeting with Greg Paulson tomorrow. He's ready to talk. Says he's been waiting for someone to expose Derek. And finally, a message from Lauren. Thanksgiving is going to be insane. I'm here for whatever you need, including bail money if you decide to throw the turkey at them. I smiled in the darkness. 3 more days until Thanksgiving. 3 more days of playing the unsuspecting wife. Then everything Derek had built on lies and theft would come crashing down, and I'd be standing in the wreckage holding the evidence of his destruction. The man beside me had no idea that his perfectly orchestrated plan had a fatal flaw. He'd underestimated the woman he'd been manipulating for 6 years. He'd assumed compliance meant ignorance, that silence meant acceptance, that patience meant weakness. He was about to learn how wrong he was about all of it. The morning before Thanksgiving arrived with unexpected snow, rare for Portland in late November. I stood at the kitchen window watching fat flakes drift past while Derek loaded groceries into the refrigerator. He'd insisted on doing all the shopping himself, claiming he wanted to take some burden off my shoulders. In reality, I suspected he wanted control over every detail of the dinner, including exactly what would be served and how the evening would unfold. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Raymond confirming that Greg Paulson's testimony had been recorded and notarized the previous afternoon. Greg had spent 3 hours detailing every suspicious transaction he'd witnessed, every conversation where Derek had pressured him to look the other way, every threat made when Greg had started asking questions. The recording was devastating, a former business partner's account of systematic fraud and intimidation. Another message came through from Carla. The cameras she'd installed throughout the house were functioning perfectly, hidden in smoke detectors, picture frames, and even the decorative clock in the dining room. Every angle of tomorrow's dinner would be captured in high-definition video with clear audio. Derek and Natalie could whisper in corners or exchange meaningful glances, and we'd have evidence of every moment. Benjamin had sent an email at 6 that morning. I opened it to find the finalized divorce filing, ready to be submitted to the court at 9 on Friday morning. Attached were copies of every document we'd compiled, every photograph Raymond had taken, every financial record Carla had uncovered. The file was 347 pages of evidence that would destroy Derek's life as thoroughly as he'd tried to destroy mine. "You're up early," Derek said, coming up behind me and wrapping his arms around my waist. "Excited about tomorrow?" I leaned back against him, playing the role I'd perfected over the past months. Just want everything to be perfect. It's been a long time since we've hosted Thanksgiving. It's going to be great. Small and intimate. Just us and Natalie. He kissed the top of my head. "I'm really proud of you for being so mature about this, Tori. A lot of women wouldn't be comfortable having their ex at a family holiday. Natalie was important to me once. I want her to feel supported during a difficult time." The lies came easily now, smooth and practiced. Derek had no idea that every word of this conversation was being recorded by the device in my pocket, that cameras were capturing his possessive gesture and self-satisfied smile. He thought he was watching me perform exactly as he'd trained me. He couldn't see that I was directing a performance of my own. Lauren called while Derek was in the shower. Her voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Please tell me you're still going through with this. Please tell me you're not actually having second thoughts. I'm going through with it. Everything is set for Friday morning. I don't know how you're staying so calm. If it were me, I'd have already set his car on fire. That would be satisfying but legally problematic. This way is better. He loses everything and I get to watch it happen. Mom called me yesterday asking if you and Derek were okay. She said she ran into Diane Hayes at the grocery store and Diane mentioned how generous Derek was being, inviting your ex to help her through a tough time. Mom thinks he's a saint. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar frustration of Derek's carefully crafted public image. His mother Diane had always adored him, convinced her son could do no wrong. She'd been cool to me from the beginning, never quite believing I was good enough for her successful, charming boy. Mom will understand soon enough. So will Diane. After we hung up, I went upstairs to my office and pulled out the folder I'd been compiling for myself. Not the legal documents or financial records, but the personal evidence of Derek's manipulation. Printed emails where he'd subtly criticized my intelligence. Text messages where he'd made me doubt my own memory of conversations. Photos from events where he'd positioned himself as the center of attention while I stood slightly behind, smiling supportively. There was the card he'd given me on our 5th anniversary with a handwritten note that read, "To my beautiful wife, who makes me look good and asks for so little in return." At the time, I'd thought it was sweet. Now I saw it for what it was, a reminder that my role was decorative and undemanding. I found the journal I'd kept during our 2nd year of marriage, back when I'd first started feeling like something was wrong but couldn't articulate what. The entries were painful to read now. Derek says I'm too sensitive about money. He's probably right. I should trust him more. And later, maybe I am remembering wrong about that conversation. Derek seems so sure, and I have been stressed lately. The gaslighting had been gradual and expertly executed. Small corrections to my memory, gentle suggestions that I was overreacting, patient explanations of why my concerns were unfounded. By the time I'd realized what was happening, I'd already internalized the doubt, already started questioning my own perceptions as a default response. Dr. Garrison had helped me understand the pattern during our sessions. Abusers don't start with obvious cruelty. They build a foundation slowly, establishing themselves as the authority on reality. Once that foundation is set, they can rewrite history with impunity because their victim has already learned not to trust their own mind. My phone rang with a call from Natalie. I stared at her name on the screen for a long moment before answering, keeping my voice warm and welcoming. Victoria, hi. I wanted to call and thank you personally for agreeing to tomorrow. I know this must be awkward for you. Not at all. It's been 8 years, Natalie. We're different people now. We really are. Her voice carried something I couldn't quite identify. Regret maybe, or nostalgia. I've thought about you often over the years. Wondered how you were doing, if you were happy. I'm very happy. Derek's been wonderful. He really has. When we reconnected, he spoke so highly of you. Said you were the kindest, most understanding person he'd ever met. The irony was suffocating. Natalie had no idea that the man praising me to her was the same man systematically stealing from me. She didn't know that Derek's admiration was actually contempt, that his compliments were really descriptions of how easy I was to manipulate. I'm looking forward to catching up tomorrow, I said. There's a lot to talk about. There really is. Natalie paused, then added, I want you to know that I'm sorry. For how things ended between us. I handled it badly and I've regretted it. The apology felt genuine, which made everything more complicated. Natalie wasn't just a villain in this story. She was another one of Derek's victims, being used and manipulated even as she participated in victimizing me. Raymond's investigation had revealed that Derek had specifically sought her out, had researched our past relationship, had identified her vulnerabilities and exploited them. We'll talk tomorrow, I said gently, and ended the call. Derek emerged from the shower wrapped in a towel, his phone in his hand. Was that Natalie? Yes. She called to thank me for the invitation. He smiled that satisfied smile I'd come to despise. See? This is going to be fine. Better than fine. It shows real growth on everyone's part. I returned to the kitchen where I'd laid out my mother's old recipe cards for Thanksgiving sides. Derek had requested traditional fare, turkey with all the fixings, nothing experimental or surprising. He wanted a Norman Rockwell painting come to life, the perfect American holiday meal to frame his perfect American betrayal. Carla arrived that afternoon under the pretense of helping me prep for tomorrow's dinner. She brought her laptop and a small toolkit, doing a final check on all the surveillance equipment while Derek was out picking up the turkey from the specialty butcher he'd insisted on using. Everything's running perfectly, she said, pulling up the camera feeds on her laptop. I've got coverage of the entire first floor and the upstairs hallway. The audio is crystal clear. Whatever happens tomorrow, we'll have a complete record. Have you heard from Melissa Chen? I asked. Raymond contacted her yesterday, posing as someone from the bank's internal audit department. Asked some questions about the downtown property loan. She got nervous fast, started asking if she was in trouble. Raymond didn't reveal anything concrete, just let her anxiety build. Tomorrow, while you're hosting dinner, Raymond will visit Melissa and show her proof of Derek's marriage, his other relationships, and his fraud. That should be enough to flip her. I thought about these women Derek had woven into his web. Natalie with her financial desperation and unresolved feelings. Melissa with her professional position and access to banking systems. Me with my trust and desire for partnership. Each of us serving a purpose in his grand scheme, each of us disposable once that purpose was fulfilled. Do you think he actually cares about any of us? I asked Carla. Or are we all just tools to him? Carla closed her laptop and looked at me directly. People like Derek don't experience relationships the way normal people do. Everyone is either useful or they're not. The moment you stop being useful, you stop existing to him. That's not a failure on your part. That's a fundamental deficiency in him. That night, Derek suggested we go to bed early. Big day tomorrow. Want to be well rested. I lay beside him in the darkness, hyper-aware of every breath, every movement. His hand found mine under the covers, fingers intertwining the way they had on our wedding night. Back then, the gesture had felt romantic and reassuring. Now it felt like being trapped. I love you, he said quietly. I know I don't say it enough, but I do. The words should have meant something. Instead, they felt like another performance, another line in the script he'd been following for years. I squeezed his hand in response, not trusting my voice to match the appropriate emotion. Derek fell asleep quickly, his breathing evening out into the slow rhythm of unconsciousness. I extracted my hand carefully and slipped out of bed, padding quietly to the bathroom. I pulled out my phone and found a text from Benjamin sent 20 minutes earlier. Everything is ready. After tomorrow's dinner, don't engage with Derek beyond what's absolutely necessary. No arguments, no revelations, no hints about what's coming. Let him think he's won. Friday morning will be soon enough for reality. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, really looked at the woman staring back. She had dark circles under her eyes from too many nights of anxious planning. Her face was thinner than it had been a year ago, stress eating away at her in ways she'd tried to ignore. But there was something else in her expression now, something that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Strength. Certainty. The calm that comes from knowing exactly what needs to be done and having the means to do it. Tomorrow I would cook a turkey and make small talk with my ex-girlfriend while my husband basked in his perception of total control. Tomorrow I would play the gracious hostess while cameras recorded every moment of his arrogance. Tomorrow I would smile across the table at the two people who'd conspired to destroy me while a recording device captured their words for prosecutors to dissect. And then on Friday, I would burn down everything Derek had built on the foundation of my stolen money and broken trust. Thanksgiving morning began with Derek in an exceptionally good mood. He woke me with coffee in bed, something he'd only done on special occasions during our entire marriage. The gesture was clearly meant to reinforce his role as the attentive, thoughtful husband, the man who would look sympathetic in divorce proceedings. "I've been thinking," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "After the holidays, we should take that trip you mentioned. Maybe somewhere warm. Cabo or Maui. Just the two of us." "That sounds wonderful." I accepted the coffee, letting him see gratitude in my expression. "You deserve it. You've been so understanding about everything lately. The long work hours, the stress with the properties. Some men's wives would complain, but you've been supportive." "I support you because I love you." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but Derek's smile showed he believed it completely. He had no concept that someone could deceive him as thoroughly as he'd been deceiving others. His worldview didn't allow for the possibility that the quiet, compliant wife he'd created could be 4 steps ahead of him. By noon, the house smelled like roasting turkey and homemade rolls. I'd been cooking since 9, following my mother's recipes while Derek hovered nearby offering unnecessary suggestions. The dining room table was set with our wedding china, white linens, and the centerpiece Derek had purchased at an overpriced boutique downtown. Natalie arrived at 2, precisely when Derek had told her to come. I watched through the front window as she parked her car, took a moment to check her appearance in the rearview mirror, then walked up our front steps carrying a bottle of wine and a bouquet of flowers. She looked nervous, I realized. Whatever confidence she'd had on the phone yesterday had been replaced with genuine apprehension. I opened the door before she could knock, greeting her with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Natalie, welcome. Come in." She stepped inside, taking in the house with wide eyes. "This place is beautiful. Derek mentioned you're an interior designer, but seeing your work in person is different. You have a real gift." "Thank you." I took the flowers and wine, noting they were expensive choices. Good taste even if the intentions behind them were rotten. "Let me get these in water. Derek's in the kitchen if you want to say hello." I watched from the dining room as Natalie entered the kitchen where Derek was basting the turkey. They greeted each other with careful formality, a brief hug and exchanged pleasantries that would have seemed perfectly appropriate if I didn't know they'd been in bed together 2 days ago. Raymond's photographs had captured them at a hotel in Beaverton Tuesday afternoon, Natalie arriving first, Derek following 20 minutes later, both of them leaving 3 hours after that. The cameras Carla had installed were capturing everything now. Every glance between them that lasted a second too long. Every time their hands brushed as they moved around the kitchen. Every moment of the performance they thought they were executing flawlessly. "Dinner is almost ready," I announced. "Why don't we move to the living room while everything finishes?" We settled into the seating area, Derek pouring wine while I arranged cheese and crackers on a serving board. Natalie perched on the edge of the sofa, still radiating nervous energy that Derek seemed not to notice or not to care about. "So Natalie, how have you been?" I asked, playing the gracious hostess. "Derek mentioned your divorce was finalized recently." "Yes, last month. It was complicated, but I'm relieved it's over. Keith and I wanted different things. It took me a while to admit we weren't right for each other. That must have been difficult. Divorce is never easy, even when it's the right decision." Derek interjected smoothly. "Natalie's handling it with remarkable grace. Not everyone can end a marriage and immediately start focusing on new opportunities." There was subtext in his words that Natalie clearly understood. Her cheeks flushed slightly and she took a long sip of wine. I thought about the future Derek had promised her, the Cannon Beach property Raymond had discovered was titled in both their names, the life they'd planned to start once I'd been efficiently disposed of. "What kind of new opportunities?" I asked innocently. Natalie glanced at Derek before answering. "Professional opportunities. I've been consulting on some real estate projects. It's exciting to be building something from the ground up. Building with my money, using my home as collateral, planning a future on the ruins of my financial security." The audacity was almost impressive. The timer went off in the kitchen, saving Natalie from having to elaborate further. Derek jumped up to check on the turkey, leaving us alone for the first time. Natalie turned to me with an expression that seemed genuinely conflicted. I want you to know this means a lot to me. Being here, being welcomed into your home after everything. Not many people would be this generous. The moment felt surreal. This woman who'd broken my heart 8 years ago, who was now sleeping with my husband and helping him steal from me, was thanking me for my generosity. I wondered if she felt any guilt at all, or if Derek had convinced her that I somehow deserved what they were doing. Everyone deserves support during difficult times, I said. That's what community is about. You're a better person than I am. Natalie's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Hurt people I shouldn't have. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever get it right. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the bank records showing $360,000 in payments, the consultant contracts that listed no actual work, the text messages where she'd celebrated Derek's manipulation of me. Whatever regret she felt wasn't enough to stop her from continuing to participate in the fraud. It's never too late to make better choices, I said. Derek returned with the announcement that dinner was ready. We moved to the dining room where the table looked like something from a magazine spread. Turkey perfectly golden, side dishes arranged artfully, candles providing warm ambience. If someone had taken a photograph in that moment, they'd have seen a lovely domestic scene, 3 adults sharing a holiday meal with warmth and civility. They wouldn't have seen the cameras recording every moment. They wouldn't have known about the legal documents ready to be filed in 36 hours. They wouldn't have understood that this dinner was actually an elaborate evidence-gathering operation disguised as a celebration of maturity and moving forward. Derek carved the turkey while maintaining a steady stream of conversation about his recent business successes, carefully edited versions that omitted the fraud and theft that had funded those successes. Natalie contributed her own stories about consulting projects, and I played my part by asking interested questions and making appropriate comments. To new beginnings, Derek said, raising his wine glass. And to people who can put the past behind them and move forward with grace. We clinked glasses. I took a sip and caught Natalie watching me over the rim of her own glass with an expression I couldn't quite read. Curiosity maybe, or assessment, trying to determine if I was really as oblivious as I seemed. This turkey is incredible, Natalie said. What's your secret? My mother's recipe. Butter under the skin, herbs inside the cavity, basting every 30 minutes. It's time-consuming but worth it. You must have been cooking all day. I appreciate the effort. It's important to do things right, especially for important occasions. Derek reached over and squeezed my hand. This is why I married you. You care about the details. You make everything special. The gesture made my skin crawl, but I smiled at him with all the warmth I could manufacture. We make a good team. You really do, Natalie agreed. Derek talks about you all the time. How supportive you are, how you trust him to handle complicated business matters. He's lucky to have a partner who understands him so well. I caught the slight emphasis on the word trust, the way her eyes flickered between Derek and me. She was fishing for something, trying to confirm that I really didn't suspect anything about their relationship or the financial fraud. Derek had probably coached her on what to say, how to reinforce the narrative of the naive, trusting wife. Trust is the foundation of any good marriage, I said. Without it, you have nothing. Derek's expression of satisfaction told me he believed I meant exactly what I said. He had no idea that my statement was actually about the trust he'd violated, the foundation he'd destroyed. Tomorrow, when I reviewed the video footage with Carla and Benjamin, we'd analyze this moment, this perfectly captured evidence of Derek's arrogance and Natalie's complicity. Dessert was pumpkin pie with fresh whipped cream, another of my mother's recipes. As I served it, Derek and Natalie were deep in conversation about a property development in Beaverton, discussing zoning regulations and profit margins with the ease of people who'd had this conversation many times before. They kept their language professional, but the familiarity between them was obvious to anyone paying attention. That property has incredible potential, Derek was saying. Once the project moves forward, the returns should be substantial. The slip was small but telling. Not I. Derek had almost revealed his partnership with Natalie before catching himself. I pretended not to notice, but the recording device in my pocket had captured every word. After dessert, Derek suggested we move back to the living room for coffee. Natalie excused herself to use the restroom, and Derek immediately pulled out his phone, checking messages with the distracted air of someone expecting important communication. I watched him type a quick response, his expression shifting to concern. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just a work issue. Nothing urgent." Natalie returned and we settled with our coffee, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Childhood Thanksgiving memories, favorite holiday traditions, innocuous subjects that felt hollow given the subtext running beneath every word. Natalie shared a story about her grandmother's terrible sweet potato casserole, and Derek laughed with genuine amusement, momentarily forgetting to maintain his careful distance. The evening wound down around 7. Natalie stood to leave, thanking us both with what seemed like genuine emotion. This was really special. I haven't felt this welcome anywhere in a long time. "You're welcome here anytime," Derek said, and I echoed the sentiment with a smile that made my face ache. We stood at the door watching Natalie drive away, Derek's arm around my waist. "See? That went perfectly. I told you it would be fine. You were right. I'm glad we did this." We cleaned up together, Derek washing dishes while I put away leftovers. It felt almost like a normal marriage, domestic and comfortable, if you didn't know that one of us was counting down the hours until the other's entire world collapsed. Later, as we got ready for bed, Derek pulled me close. "Thank you for today. For being so understanding and mature. A lot of women would have made this difficult, but you made it easy. This is why our marriage works, Tori. You trust me and I take care of things. It's a perfect system." I rested my head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, wondering how many more times I'd have to endure his touch before Friday morning freed me from this performance. Just before I fell asleep, my phone buzzed quietly with a text from Raymond. "Package delivered. Melissa Chen is fully cooperating. Provided additional evidence we didn't even know existed. Derek's entire empire is about to implode." I closed my eyes, Derek's arm heavy across my waist, and counted the hours until dawn. Friday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of sharp November light that makes everything look exposed and vulnerable. I woke at 5 to find Derek already gone, a note on his pillow saying he'd gone for an early run. The house felt different somehow, as if it knew what was about to happen within its walls. Benjamin's text came through at exactly 6. Filed. Emergency hearing set for 11. Asset freeze is in effect as of this moment. Derek's accounts, credit cards, and access to all properties are now locked pending judicial review. I made coffee with hands that refused to shake despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. By 7, Derek still hadn't returned from his run. At 7:15, my phone rang with his number. "Tori, something's wrong with my credit card." I stopped to get gas and it was declined. "Can you check our account?" I pulled up the banking app, seeing exactly what Benjamin had told me I'd see. Multiple accounts showing restricted access, pending legal review displayed across the screen in stark red letters. That's strange. It says the accounts are restricted. Maybe it's a security issue? Have you tried calling the bank? I'm calling them now. This is ridiculous. I'll be home soon. He ended the call abruptly, frustration evident in his tone. I imagined him standing at a gas station, his carefully controlled world beginning to crack at the edges, not yet understanding the magnitude of what was happening but sensing something fundamental had shifted. Carla arrived at 7:30 carrying her laptop and a box of pastries from the bakery on Hawthorne. She set up at the dining room table where we'd hosted Thanksgiving dinner less than 40 hours ago, pulling up the surveillance footage and beginning the process of creating a comprehensive video compilation for the court. "Watch this part," she said, pointing to the screen. "Derek and Natalie in the kitchen while you were getting the flowers. Look at his hand on her lower back. That's not how you touch a business associate." The footage showed exactly what Carla described. Derek's hand lingering on Natalie's back, his body angled toward hers in a way that spoke of intimacy and familiarity. Natalie leaning into the touch, her face tilted up toward his with an expression of affection that contradicted every word of their careful public performance. And here, Carla advanced the footage to later in the evening. When you went to the kitchen to get dessert. Listen to what they're saying. She turned up the volume. Derek's voice came through clearly. 3 more weeks and the Pearl District payment clears. Then we file and this whole charade is over. Natalie's response was quieter but audible. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Sitting at her table, eating her food, pretending to be grateful for her hospitality. It feels cruel. She'll be fine. Victoria always lands on her feet. Besides, she'll have her little design firm. That's all she really cares about anyway. The casual dismissal of me, the assumption that I'd be fine with having my life dismantled, made something cold and hard settle in my chest. This wasn't just theft or betrayal. It was contempt, the absolute certainty that I was too insignificant to be worth genuine concern. Benjamin called at 8. I'm at the courthouse now. The judge reviewed our emergency filing and is taking this very seriously. Derek's attorney, Mitchell Cross, just showed up looking confused. He clearly wasn't expecting any of this. Has Derek tried to contact you? Not yet, but he will once he figures out what's happening. Don't answer any calls from him. Let him spiral. The more desperate and angry he becomes, the worse he'll look when we get to court. By 8:30, Derek's calls started coming through. The first was tense but controlled. Tori, something weird is happening with our accounts. I can't access anything. The bank says there's a legal hold but they won't tell me why. Do you know anything about this? I let it go to voicemail. The second call came 5 minutes later, Derek's voice tighter with barely suppressed panic. Tori, where are you? Call me back. This is serious. Someone's frozen our assets and I need to figure out what's going on. The third call was angry. Tori, I don't know what you've done but you need to fix it right now. Call me back immediately. Raymond texted at 9. Just left Derek's office building. He showed up there 20 minutes ago and found himself locked out. His key card doesn't work, his assistant won't let him in, and building security has been instructed not to admit him. He's currently sitting in his car in the parking lot making frantic phone calls. Another text followed quickly. Natalie just called Derek in a panic. Her bank accounts are also frozen. She's figured out that she's implicated in whatever is happening. According to the call logs we're monitoring, she's called him 17 times in the past hour. The dominoes were falling exactly as Benjamin had predicted. Derek and Natalie were both scrambling to understand what was happening, reaching out to lawyers and banks and each other, everyone telling them the same thing. There was a court order, a serious legal matter, details pending judicial review. At 9:30, Derek came home. I heard his car in the driveway, the slam of the door, his footsteps heavy on the front porch. He burst into the house, his face flushed from cold and anger, his running clothes still on from the morning. What did you do? He didn't even greet me, just stood in the doorway of the dining room where Carla and I were sitting with her laptop. What the hell did you do, Victoria? I don't know what you're talking about. I kept my voice calm, neutral, giving him nothing to grab onto. Our accounts are frozen. My office is locked. My attorney says you filed for divorce with some kind of emergency motion. He held up his phone, shaking it at me. You went behind my back and did this without even talking to me? I filed for divorce because you've been stealing from me for 3 years. I stood up, meeting his eyes directly. You've been having an affair with Natalie. You've stolen $1.3 million from our joint accounts and used it to buy properties in your name only. You forged my signature on a prenup I never signed and on a life insurance policy I never approved. Derek's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, calculation, and then anger that looked almost convincing. That's insane. You've lost your mind. Who's been putting these ideas in your head? Carla raised her hands slightly. That would be me. along with attorney Benjamin Walsh, private investigator Raymond Brooks, and a forensic accountant who's currently presenting evidence of your fraud to the district attorney's office. Derek's attention snapped to Carla. You. I should have known. You've always been poison, turning Tori against me, making her paranoid and suspicious. I turned Tori toward reality. There's a difference. This is what happens when you listen to bitter, lonely people, Derek said, turning back to me. Carla's jealous of what we have, so she's invented this elaborate conspiracy theory. And you were stupid enough to believe her. I have recordings of you, Derek. Your voice admitting to fraud, discussing your plans with Natalie, explaining how you've been hiding money. I have video of you and Natalie together. I have testimony from your former business partner about your illegal business practices. This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is documentation. Derek went very still. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something calculating. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up in court. You recorded me without my knowledge. That's illegal. Oregon is a one-party consent state, Carla said. Only one person in a conversation needs to know it's being recorded. Victoria knew. The recordings are perfectly legal. His phone rang, Mitchell Cross's name appearing on the screen. Derek answered it, listening for a long moment before his face went pale. He ended the call without saying a word. Your attorney just saw the evidence, didn't he? I asked. Derek sat down heavily on the couch, his earlier bluster completely evaporated. How long have you known? Since July. I've been documenting everything since the moment I realized you were stealing from me. 4 months. He looked up at me with something that might have been respect if it wasn't mixed with such obvious fury. You've been playing me for 4 months. You've been playing me for 6 years. This seems like a fair trade. His phone rang again, this time Natalie's name on the screen. Derek didn't answer, just stared at it until it went to voicemail. When it immediately rang again, he stood up abruptly. I need to talk to my attorney. This conversation is over. The hearing is at 11, I called after him as he headed toward the door. Courtroom 6. Don't be late. He left without another word, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. Carla and I looked at each other across the dining room table. That went better than expected, Carla said. I thought he might try to intimidate you or make threats. He's too smart for that. He knows threats would just be more evidence against him. Right now, he's trying to figure out if there's any way to salvage this. There isn't, Carla said firmly. We made sure of that. At 10:30, we left for the courthouse. Benjamin met us in the hallway outside courtroom 6, carrying a briefcase that presumably held copies of all the evidence we'd compiled. Raymond was there too, having just come from interviewing Melissa Chen one final time. Melissa provided bank records showing Derek falsified income statements on the loan application for the downtown property, Raymond reported. She's prepared to testify that he pressured her to approve the loan despite obvious red flags, and that he promised her a relationship if she helped him. Another woman manipulated into complicity. How many others were there that we hadn't discovered? How many people had Derek used and discarded over the years while maintaining his image as a successful, ethical businessman? Derek arrived at 10:55 with Mitchell Cross, his attorney looking significantly less confident than his reputation suggested he should be. They took their seats on the opposite side of the courtroom, Derek refusing to look in my direction. Judge Patricia Morrison entered at exactly 11, a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for seeing through manipulative litigants. She'd reviewed our filing overnight and had apparently spent her morning going through the evidence Benjamin had submitted. This is one of the most comprehensive emergency filings I've seen in 20 years on the bench, Judge Morrison began. Mrs. Hayes, your attorney has presented evidence of systematic financial fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. Mr. Hayes, your attorney has had approximately 3 hours to review this evidence. Do you dispute any of the specific allegations? Mitchell Cross stood. Your Honor, we need time to properly review the extensive documentation. This filing came without warning and includes allegations of criminal conduct that require thorough investigation. The documentation has been building for 4 months, Judge Morrison said dryly. The lack of warning is hardly Mrs. Hayes's problem. Mr. Cross, does your client dispute that he moved $1.3 million from joint accounts into shell companies without his wife's knowledge or consent? Cross leaned down to confer with Derek, who shook his head. We dispute the characterization of these transactions as theft. These were legitimate business investments. Judge Morrison put on her reading glasses and pulled up a document. I'm looking at testimony from Gregory Paulson, formerly Mr. Hayes's business partner. Mr. Paulson states that Mr. Hayes explicitly told him these property purchases were being hidden from Mrs. Hayes. He quotes Mr. Hayes as saying, and I'm reading directly from the sworn statement, "What Victoria doesn't know won't hurt her. By the time she figures out where the money went, it'll all be in my name and there's nothing she can do about it." The courtroom was silent. Derek's face had gone white, his hands clenched on the table in front of him. Your Honor, Cross began, but Judge Morrison held up her hand. I'm not finished. The evidence also includes a forged prenuptial agreement with Mrs. Hayes's signature falsified on multiple pages. Mr. Hayes, did you create a prenuptial agreement and forge your wife's signature? Derek stood slowly. Your Honor, there were discussions about a prenup before our marriage. I may have drafted something, but I don't recall the specific circumstances. You don't recall forging your wife's signature on a legal document? I never intended to use it. It was just a precaution. A precaution that involved fraud. Judge Morrison set down the document and looked directly at Derek. Mr. Hayes, I'm also seeing evidence of a life insurance policy taken out on Mrs. Hayes without her knowledge. Can you explain that? Mitchell Cross stood again. Your Honor, my client is willing to dissolve that policy immediately. It was a financial planning error, not a malicious act. A financial planning error that would have paid Mr. Hayes $2 million in the event of his wife's death. Judge Morrison's tone made it clear what she thought of that explanation. Combined with evidence that Mr. Hayes has been systematically isolating Mrs. Hayes financially and socially, I find this policy deeply troubling. She pulled out another document. I also have evidence provided by the district attorney's office that Mr. Hayes falsified loan applications, bribed a city inspector to overlook zoning violations, and maintained dual accounting books to evade taxes. These are federal crimes, Mr. Hayes. This court's asset freeze is the least of your problems. Derek's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it and his face went even paler. Judge Morrison noticed. Something urgent, Mr. Hayes? My business partner just informed me that federal investigators are at our office with a search warrant. Judge Morrison nodded. That would be expected given the evidence of fraud. Mr. Cross, does your client have anything else to say in his defense? Cross leaned down for a whispered conference with Derek that lasted several minutes. Finally, Cross stood. Your Honor, we request a continuance to properly prepare our response to these allegations. Denied. The evidence is extensive and well documented. Mrs. Hayes has provided audio recordings, video surveillance, financial records, and multiple witness testimonies. Mr. Hayes had every opportunity to conduct his business honestly and to treat his wife with basic respect. He chose to do neither. She turned to Benjamin. Mr. Walsh, what is your client seeking? Full dissolution of the marriage with division of assets based on actual contributions rather than the forged prenup. Return of all funds stolen from joint accounts. Exclusive use of the marital home. Restraining order preventing Mr. Hayes from contacting Mrs. Hayes or interfering with her business. And we're asking that the court refer this matter to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. Judge Morrison made notes on her tablet. Mr. Hayes, do you understand that the evidence against you includes recordings where you explicitly admit to fraud and theft? Derek stood again. Your Honor, I was trying to protect our assets. Real estate investment is complicated and I didn't want to burden Victoria with the details. By stealing her inheritance and forging legal documents? I made mistakes in judgment, but I never intended to harm my wife. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and looked at Derek with undisguised contempt. Mr. Hayes, you systematically stole from your wife, manipulated her into doubting her own perceptions, forged her signature on multiple legal documents, carried on an affair with her ex-girlfriend while using that woman to further your fraud, and took out a life insurance policy on your wife without her knowledge. Your intentions are irrelevant when your actions speak so clearly. She turned to her clerk. The court finds in favor of Mrs. Hayes on all counts. All marital assets are to be frozen pending a complete forensic audit. Mr. Hayes is to vacate the marital home within 24 hours and is prohibited from contacting Mrs. Hayes except through legal counsel. A restraining order is hereby issued with a radius of 500 feet. Additionally, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office with a recommendation for immediate investigation and prosecution. She looked at Derek one more time. Mr. Hayes, you came into this courtroom thinking you could talk your way out of the consequences of your actions. You severely underestimated your wife. That's a mistake you'll have time to reflect on. Court was adjourned. Derek sat frozen at the defendant's table while Mitchell Cross gathered his papers with the defeated air of an attorney who knew his client was beyond help. Benjamin shook my hand, then Carla's, satisfaction evident in his expression. The district attorney is waiting to speak with you, he told me. They want a full statement about everything you witnessed and documented. We left the courtroom to find a small crowd had gathered in the hallway. Word had apparently spread through Portland's legal and business community about the hearing. I recognized several faces from Derek's professional network, people who'd attended his networking events and business dinners, all of them whispering and staring as we passed. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren. Just saw the news. Some reporter got wind of the hearing and it's already online. Derek's company website has been taken down. His clients are demanding their money back. It's a complete meltdown. Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Mrs. Hayes, this is Patricia Paulson, Greg's wife. Thank you for exposing what Derek did to my husband. Greg has been terrified for months that Derek would destroy him. Now maybe we can finally rebuild our lives. We spent the next 3 hours at the district attorney's office, going through every detail of Derek's fraud with prosecutors who took extensive notes and asked pointed questions. They were particularly interested in the forged life insurance policy and the timeline of Derek's increasing financial control. This isn't just marital fraud, Assistant District Attorney Sarah Kim said. This is a pattern of predatory behavior targeting multiple victims. Your ex-girlfriend Natalie, Melissa Chen at the bank, your husband's business partner Gregory Paulson. Derek Hayes systematically identified vulnerable people and exploited them for financial gain. What happens to Natalie and Melissa? I asked. That depends on their level of cooperation. If they provide testimony and evidence against Mr. Hayes, we may offer reduced charges or immunity. If they refuse, they'll face prosecution as co-conspirators. Raymond had scheduled a meeting with Natalie for that afternoon at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. I agreed to attend, though Benjamin warned me it might be emotionally difficult. Natalie was already there when we arrived, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she wasn't drinking. She looked like she hadn't slept, her eyes red-rimmed and her usually perfect appearance disheveled. Victoria, she started, but I held up my hand. I know what you're going to say. You didn't know the full extent of what Derek was doing. You thought you were just helping with legitimate business deals. He manipulated you the same way he manipulated me. Natalie's eyes filled with tears. I knew it was wrong. The moment I agreed to put my name on those companies, I knew I was crossing a line. But Derek said you didn't understand business, that you were holding him back, that the marriage was already over and everything but paperwork. And you believed him. I wanted to believe him. She wiped at her eyes with a napkin. After we broke up, I spent years regretting how I ended things. When Derek contacted me 2 years ago and said you'd moved on and were happy, I thought maybe here was a chance to be in your orbit again, even if just professionally. Then he started telling me about problems in your marriage, and I convinced myself I was helping. You were stealing, Natalie. From me specifically. You knew that money was partly mine. I know. She looked directly at me for the first time. I have no excuse that makes it right. Derek promised we'd be together, that once the divorce was finalized we'd start over in Costa Rica or Mexico, somewhere sunny where we could leave all this behind. I think I knew it was a fantasy, but I wanted it to be real so badly that I ignored every warning sign. Raymond slid a folder across the table. These are phone records showing Derek's relationship with Melissa Chen. He's been seeing her for 8 months. He was running the same game on her that he ran on you. Natalie opened the folder, her hands shaking as she looked through the evidence. Text messages between Derek and Melissa, photos of them together, hotel receipts. Her face crumpled as the full scope of Derek's manipulation became clear. He told me I was special. That what we had was different. He told all of us we were special, I said quietly. That's what he does. He finds what people want to hear and he says it with complete conviction. The district attorney wants your testimony, Raymond told Natalie. Everything you know about the shell companies, the property purchases, the falsified documents. In exchange, they'll offer immunity on the fraud charges and reduced charges on the conspiracy counts. And if I refuse? Then you're looking at 10 to 15 years in federal prison for wire fraud and conspiracy to commit theft. Natalie closed the folder and looked at me. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything. It won't fix what I've done to you, but maybe it'll help make sure Derek can't hurt anyone else. We left her sitting at that table, still crying into her cold coffee, the wreckage of Derek's manipulation evident in every line of her face. That evening, back at home with Carla and Lauren, I watched the local news coverage of Derek's arrest. He'd been taken into custody at 5 that afternoon on charges of wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The footage showed him being led out of the federal building in handcuffs, his face carefully blank, refusing to answer shouted questions from reporters. The news anchor described him as a prominent Portland real estate developer accused of defrauding his wife and multiple business associates. Derek's photo appeared on the screen alongside a list of charges that would likely result in significant prison time. My phone rang with a call from Diane Hayes, Derek's mother. I answered out of morbid curiosity. How could you do this to him? Her voice was shrill with rage. Derek gave you everything. A beautiful home, financial security, social standing. And this is how you repay him? By destroying his life with false accusations? Mrs. Hayes, everything I've accused Derek of is documented fact. He stole from me, forged legal documents, and committed multiple felonies. You were nothing when he met you. A small-time designer with barely any clients. He made you what you are. Derek made me a victim. I made myself everything else. I hung up before she could respond. Lauren put her arm around me and Carla raised her wine glass. To women who document everything and men who underestimate them. We clinked glasses as the news moved on to other stories, Derek's face disappearing from the screen but not from my memory. The man who'd spent 6 years trying to erase my financial existence was about to spend the next decade in federal prison learning exactly how wrong he'd been about me. 6 months after that Thanksgiving dinner, I stood in the renovated storefront on Division Street, watching the sign installers mount the final letter. Haven House, the name glowed in warm bronze lettering. A sanctuary for women navigating financial abuse and complicated divorces, funded by the settlement Derek had been forced to pay after the forensic audit revealed even more hidden assets than we'd originally discovered. The space had been a neglected auto repair shop when I'd found it in January. Now it held private consultation rooms, a secure document storage facility, a children's play area for women who needed somewhere safe to bring their kids, and offices for the team I'd assembled. Carla ran our digital security division, teaching women how to protect their information and document abuse. A financial counselor named Patricia, Greg Paulson's wife, helped clients understand their assets and identify hidden money. Benjamin donated 10 hours a week providing legal consultations at no charge. Our first client arrived on a Tuesday morning, a woman named Sophie whose husband had been slowly draining their retirement accounts while convincing her she was too emotional to understand their finances. She sat in my office with trembling hands, telling a story that sounded painfully familiar. By the end of the week, we'd helped Sophie freeze her accounts, document her husband's theft, and connect with an attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. Derek's trial had concluded in March with convictions on all counts. Wire fraud, conspiracy, forgery, tax evasion. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison, citing the calculated nature of his crimes and the multiple victims he'd exploited. Natalie received 3 years probation in exchange for her testimony, along with community service requirements that included speaking to groups about financial manipulation. Melissa Chen lost her banking license but avoided prison time by cooperating with investigators and exposing other fraudulent loans Derek had secured through intimidation. The aftermath had been messy in ways I hadn't anticipated. Friends I'd thought were mine revealed themselves to be Derek's, disappearing once his money and influence evaporated. Business contacts ghosted me, apparently uncomfortable with the woman who'd publicly destroyed Portland's formerly golden real estate developer. Derek's mother sent a letter filled with such vitriol that Benjamin advised keeping it as evidence in case she escalated to actual harassment. But there were surprises too. Dr. Garrison reduced her therapy rates when I told her about Haven House, saying she wanted to support the mission. Antonio Rossi, the owner of Lucia's Italian bistro where Derek and I had celebrated so many anniversaries, called to apologize for not seeing the signs of abuse. He'd become one of Haven House's largest donors, hosting fundraising dinners quarterly. Even Greg Paulson had reached out, offering to speak to other men who'd been pushed out of businesses by manipulative partners. Lauren brought her daughters to the Haven House opening day celebration, the girls running through the space with balloons while Lauren stood beside me watching the community we'd built. "You did this," she said. "Out of something terrible, you made something that matters." The money from the settlement, combined with the properties I'd been awarded in the divorce, had given me resources I'd never imagined having. The Cannon Beach vacation home, once titled in Derek and Natalie's names, had been seized and awarded to me as restitution. I'd sold it immediately, unable to bear the thought of vacationing in a place that represented such betrayal. That money funded Haven House's first year of operations. My design firm had thrived in unexpected ways. Clients who'd heard my story specifically sought me out, wanting to work with someone who understood survival and transformation. The Pearl District contract had completed successfully, leading to 3 more major commercial projects. I'd hired 2 additional designers and moved into a larger office space, building the business Derek had once dismissed as my little hobby into something substantial and respected. Natalie sent letters occasionally, apologizing and updating me on her therapy progress. I read them but rarely responded. Forgiveness felt too generous for what she'd done, but hatred required energy I preferred to direct elsewhere. She existed in my past as a cautionary tale about how pain and desperation could turn people into accomplices to cruelty. The recording of that Thanksgiving dinner had become a teaching tool. With all identifying details removed, I played it at workshops about recognizing manipulation, letting other women hear the subtle ways abusers test boundaries and manufacture compliance. The calm way Derek had invited my ex-girlfriend to dinner, the casual cruelty disguised as generosity, the assumption that I would accept whatever he decided, it all demonstrated the playbook so many controlling partners followed. On a warm June evening, I hosted a small gathering at Haven House to celebrate our first 50 clients. Women stood in small groups sharing stories, comparing notes on divorce attorneys and financial planners, building networks of support that would outlast any single abusive relationship. Sophie was there with her daughter, both of them smiling in ways Sophie said they hadn't smiled in years. Her divorce had finalized the previous week with her receiving everything her husband had tried to hide. Carla found me standing by the window watching the sunset paint Division Street in shades of amber and rose. "You doing okay?" she asked. "I'm good. Really good, actually." It surprised me to realize I meant it. The past 6 months had been exhausting and occasionally devastating, but they'd also been clarifying. Without Derek's voice in my head telling me what to think and feel, I'd rediscovered the woman I'd been before I'd met him. Strong, capable, worthy of respect and honesty. "Think you'll date again?" Carla asked. "Eventually. When I meet someone who sees me as a partner instead of a project. Someone who adds to my life instead of trying to control it. That's a pretty high bar." "I've earned a high bar." We watched the sun disappear behind the buildings, the sky darkening to deep purple. Somewhere across town, in a federal prison, Derek was probably lying on a narrow bunk thinking about the empire he'd lost. He'd spent years building a facade of success on a foundation of theft and manipulation, never imagining that the quiet wife he'd underestimated would be the one to bring it all crashing down. That Thanksgiving dinner felt like it had happened in another lifetime, to a different version of me. The woman who'd smiled across the table at her husband and ex-girlfriend while secretly recording their every word had transformed into someone who helped other women find their own strength. Derek had tried to teach me a lesson about compliance and knowing my place. Instead, he'd taught me that documentation defeats manipulation, that patience can be more powerful than confrontation, and that the people who underestimate you create their own destruction. The best revenge hadn't been Derek's prison sentence or Natalie's probation or the complete dismantling of the life they'd planned to build on my stolen money. The best revenge was standing in this space I'd created, helping women escape the same traps I'd barely escaped, turning Derek's cruelty into something that would help dozens, maybe hundreds, of women over the years to come. He'd left me at a metaphorical table designed to humiliate me. I'd turned that table into a foundation for building something he could never destroy. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.